They say silence speaks louder than words. That day, mine roared. I didn't leave a note. I didn't explain myself. I just placed the will, neatly folded, on the center of the dining room table, right where everyone would see it. And then I waited. I hid behind the hallway wall, heart pounding like I was committing a crime, not seeking the truth. But maybe that's what hurts the most. The truth did feel criminal. The moment they saw the envelope, everything changed. The laughter stopped. The tone of their voices shifted, and as they opened it, slowly, cautiously, my breath froze in my chest. I wasn't supposed to hear what came next, but I did. Every word, every whisper, every false smile they practiced just in case I walked in. And it shattered me. For years, I told myself they loved me, that their forgetfulness, their distractions, their distance were all part of life, that children grow up, get busy, have their own troubles. I excuse every birthday they forgot, every dinner they skipped, every phone call that never came. I was the understanding mother, the quiet grandmother, the one who never complained. But silence, I've learned, is not always grace. Sometimes it's a cage. After my husband passed, they insisted I live with them. "You won't be alone," my son said. "We'll take care of you," my daughter-in-law promised. But soon I realized taking care was more about control than compassion. My room was at the back of the house. My meals were left out cold. Conversations didn't include me. Decisions were made without me. And every day I felt myself fading into wallpaper, present but unseen. That's why I did it. That's why I wrote a will without telling anyone. And not just any will. I rewrote everything. I gave my home, my savings, my jewelry, everything I had to the one person who had shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. My grandson, Lucas. He didn't know. No one did. I wanted to see for once who would love me without strings attached. So I left it there like bait. And the way they reacted, it told me everything I needed to know. At first they laughed, thinking it was a draft or a joke. Then, as they read the names, saw theirs missing, panic set in. Their voices rose. My name was suddenly on every tongue. They spoke of misunderstandings, of how I must have been confused, how I wasn't thinking straight. My daughter-in-law said, "We've always loved her." But her voice trembled, not from sadness, but from fear. Fear of losing what she thought was guaranteed. From my corner of the hallway, I saw it all. I felt the tears sting behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't weak. Not anymore. I finally understood that sometimes the only way to reveal someone's truth is to remove the reward. And what they did next proved what kind of family I had built around me, and what kind of legacy I would leave behind. If this story is already gripping your heart, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That small click tells us you want more stories that matter and helps these voices be heard by thousands more. Now, before we dive deeper, let me ask you something. Have you ever tested the love around you, only to discover it was based on what you could give, not who you were? Have you ever pulled away and finally seen who stayed? Share your experience in the comments. Because sometimes your story may be the light someone else is desperately waiting to see. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 78 years old. If you had known me 10 years ago, you'd never imagine I'd end up where I did. Back then, I was the one everyone turned to. I organized church fundraisers, baked the best peach cobbler in 3 counties, and never missed a birthday or holiday. My husband Walter used to say I was the glue that kept our family together. And I believed him. We built a life rooted in love, sacrifice, and tradition. I was respected, needed, and loved. Or so I thought. When Walter passed away, something inside me shattered. We had been married for over 50 years. Suddenly, the house that once echoed with laughter became unbearably silent. I tried to hold on. I stayed strong through the funeral, the condolences, the quiet evenings. But grief has a way of shrinking the world around you. Days blurred, meals became optional, mornings felt heavier. And my son, David, noticing the change, made a suggestion. "Mom, why don't you come live with us for a while? It'll be easier. You shouldn't be alone." I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to be a burden, but he insisted. His wife, Rebecca, even called me saying, "We'd love to have you. You deserve to rest now." I wanted to believe it was out of love, so I packed a small suitcase, left the home Walter and I had built from scratch, and moved into the guest room of their suburban house. The first week was fine, comfortable even. Rebecca made tea in the evenings. David would stop by my room to chat after work, and my granddaughter, Lily, showed me how to use a streaming service on the TV. I thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. A new chapter with family, just as Walter would have wanted. But slowly the tone began to change. Not all at once. No, these things never do. It started with the small things. Rebecca stopped making tea. David didn't have time to talk. Lily forgot to say goodnight. One morning, I made breakfast early, scrambled eggs and toast for everyone, like I used to, but no one came downstairs. Hours passed before I heard footsteps, and even then, there was no "thank you." Just a quick glance at the clock and mumbled words like, "You didn't have to do that." That's when it began. The feeling of being in the way, of occupying space I no longer had a right to. I wasn't consulted when they rearranged the living room. They moved my recliner into the garage without asking. "It doesn't match the new style," Rebecca said. My opinion wasn't welcome anymore. I'd offer a suggestion. What to cook, which detergent to buy. And they'd respond with, "Don't worry about it, Mom, we've got it." But they didn't have it. They were pushing me out, decision by decision, cold glance by cold glance. I used to wake early, walk around the garden, feed the birds. Now I sat by the window and watched weeds take over the flower beds Walter once tended. I tried to start conversations, to reconnect, but I always felt like a background noise they wished they could turn off. At dinner, I'd speak, and they'd barely react. Sometimes, I'd hear them talk about me in the third person while I was in the room. "She's always sitting there. Doesn't she have anything better to do?" Rebecca once muttered under her breath. I became invisible in a home where I was supposed to feel safe. One day, I overheard a conversation. David was talking to Rebecca in the hallway. I wasn't meant to hear it, but I was walking slowly and they didn't see me. "She's starting to get forgetful," he said. "Maybe we should talk to someone about care. Options. Care options." Not once did they ask me how I felt. Not once did they say, "Mom, are you happy here?" The worst part, I didn't even argue. I went back to my room, sat on the bed, and stared at the family photos on the wall. Pictures of me holding David as a baby. Me and Walter dancing at their wedding. Me reading bedtime stories to Lily. What changed? When did love become inconvenience? One night, I decided to test something. I wrote a version of my will. Not legally binding, just handwritten, and left it on the dining room table. I didn't say a word. I simply wanted to see, to observe, to know the truth they were too polite to say out loud. I stood behind the cracked door to the hallway, hidden, and waited. I won't tell you what I heard yet, but I will say this. The truth doesn't scream. It whispers. It reveals itself in the way people act when they think you're not watching. And what I saw that day changed everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. Now, If you've ever questioned your place in a family, if you've ever sat silently wondering if your love still matters, stay with me. This story isn't just mine. It might be yours too. And what happened next will make you rethink everything. If you're still watching, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps histórias como essa alcançarem mais pessoas que precisam ouvir que elas não estão sozinhas. And before we move on, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed silent just to protect your peace? Or watched someone reveal their true face when they thought you weren't listening? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs today. It started with silence, not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that burns slowly, like ice on skin. I would walk into the room and conversations would end mid-sentence. My name stopped sendo, mentioned at the dinner table. They no longer asked how I felt, no longer asked if I needed anything. My place in the house had shifted from someone essential to someone extra, a shadow moving through the background of their lives. I remember the day they forgot to buy my medication. Not once, but twice. At first I thought it was an accident. I even smiled and said, "It happens, don't worry." But when I reminded them, my son simply raised his eyebrows and said, "Didn't you already take those?" The words weren't cruel, but the tone was sharp, as if I were a burden, as if my needs were an interruption in their carefully curated lives. Then came the interruptions. Every time I tried to speak, share a memory, or just add to the conversation, someone would talk over me. My voice became like a background noise. I'd begin a sentence only to be cut off by Jessica asking where the remote was, or my son, Peter, saying he had a meeting. My stories, those little pieces of who I am, were treated like clutter on the floor. Things to be stepped over, ignored. What hurt the most wasn't the silence. It was the laughter. The laughter at my expense. I'd hear my granddaughter, Emily, joking with her friends about how Grandma keeps telling the same story 3 times. Once, I stood just outside her bedroom door and heard her mimic the way I talk. They laughed, and that laughter tore something inside me. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. I just went back to my room, closed the door, and sat in the quiet. I tried to stay useful. Folding laundry, setting the table, organizing drawers. But even then, I was met with sighs and rolled eyes. "You don't have to do that," Peter would say, not kindly, but as if I were interfering. And if something went missing or out of place, it was always assumed I was the one who lost it. "Mum probably put it somewhere weird again," I heard him say once to Jessica. I wasn't losing my memory. I was losing my dignity. So, I started writing. Not for anyone to read, not at first. Just for me. I hid a small notebook under my pillow, and every night I would write 1 page. A list of the things they said. The way they looked at me. The way they forgot to say goodnight. The notebook became my only friend in that house. It held my pain when no one else would. I wrote about the dinner where they laughed about sending me to a quiet place so they could have their space back. I wrote about the day they left me alone all afternoon, forgetting I had a doctor's appointment. I wrote about the night I heard Emily say, "She's just waiting to die." That one took my breath away. Every entry I wrote felt like proof that I still mattered, that I still had a voice, even if no one in that house wanted to hear it. And the more I wrote, the clearer it became. I wasn't imagining things. I was witnessing something real, a slow erasure of my presence, a quiet rejection. They didn't hit me, they didn't yell, but they forgot me while I was still in the room. That's a different kind of cruelty, one that's harder to name, but no less painful. It's when someone acts like your love, your time, your stories no longer serve a purpose. One night I left my notebook open on the dresser by accident. When I came back from brushing my teeth, it had been moved. The pages slightly bent. Someone had touched it, read it, but no one said a word. That silence, that thick, suffocating silence, it told me everything I needed to know. And yet, even with all that, I stayed, hoping maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe Peter would ask how I slept. Maybe Jessica would invite me to sit on the porch with her. Maybe Emily would hug me like she used to when she was little, whispering, "I love you, Grandma." But the maybes never came. And still, I wrote, because I refused to disappear quietly. Now I ask you, have you ever felt yourself fading in a place you once called home? Have you ever had to prove your worth to those you love the most? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be the light someone else needs to keep going. I had never written a document with so much intention. Each word was placed with precision, not out of anger, but out of painful clarity. I sat with Mr. Bradley, a longtime family lawyer, who had helped me and my late husband draft our first will decades ago. But this time was different. This time there was no celebration, no future plans, just silence. Silence, and the understanding that not everyone who shares your blood shares your heart. I didn't tell Peter or Jessica I was going. I told them I had a doctor's appointment. They didn't ask further. Why would they? In recent months, they'd made it clear that my life had become background noise in the house, that I was an obligation, not a person. Mr. Bradley looked at me with gentle eyes as I handed him my notebook. "Everything's in here," I said, and he read. Every word. Every night I was forgotten. Every time I was mocked. He didn't interrupt. When he finished, he placed the notebook down and said, "We'll write this together. You don't owe anyone anything, not anymore." I decided that day. Peter and Jessica would receive nothing. Not out of revenge, but because they had already taken what mattered. My peace, my presence, my dignity. Emily, my granddaughter, would get one thing: a letter. A letter I had written weeks ago, before the worst of their coldness had settled into her laughter. But the heart of the will, the legacy of everything I had built with my husband, our savings, our home, our land, it would all go to someone who had never asked for anything. My niece Abigail, who had visited me when no one else did, who called me every birthday without fail, who had shown me kindness when I thought I was invisible. Mr. Bradley signed the final copy and made 2 duplicates, one for the registry, one sealed in his office, and one unsealed, that I placed in a simple white envelope. I took that envelope home, walked into the living room while everyone was out, and left it on the kitchen table. Right in the center. No name, no note, just the truth sitting in plain sight. Then I waited. I sat in the hallway with the door cracked just enough to see. Jessica walked in first. She stopped when she saw the envelope, called out for Peter. He came in, curious, annoyed. She handed him the will. He opened it, read the first page, and I saw it. The moment his face changed, his brow furrowed, his mouth twitched, but not in sorrow, in calculation. They read it together, whispering, flipping through pages. Then Jessica laughed, short and bitter. "She really did it," she said. "She actually cut us out." Peter didn't speak, but his silence screamed louder than any words. He turned to Jessica and said, "We have to fix this, fast." Suddenly, the coldness shifted. That night, for the first time in months, they asked me if I wanted tea. They smiled. They checked on me before bed. Jessica even placed a blanket over my lap while I watched TV. They didn't know I had seen everything, heard every whisper. Their kindness wasn't real, it was strategy. I wasn't a mother again. I was a transaction, a document, and I sat there, watching their performance, letting it unfold. It wasn't anger that filled me. It was confirmation. They had just proven every word in that Will was right. And you? Have you ever tested someone's love just to see what was real? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes it's only in silence that the truth speaks loudest. They thought I couldn't see through them. They thought a few cups of coffee and some hollow compliments would erase years of neglect. But I wasn't the same woman who entered that house months ago, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of hope. I had changed. Life had changed me. And now I could smell false affection from across the room. It started the morning after they found the will. Suddenly, Jessica knocked on my door with a tray in her hands. Coffee, a slice of toast, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Mum. Thought you'd like a little breakfast in bed today," she chirped. I nodded, took the tray, and smiled back. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to see just how far they would go. Peter followed next. He sat beside me on the couch and asked about my favorite books, as if he hadn't rolled his eyes every time I spoke in the past 6 months. He complimented my knitting, asked if I wanted to watch something together. Jessica laughed louder at my jokes. Emily, my granddaughter, suddenly found time to paint. My nails! It was like watching strangers play characters in a play I hadn't agreed to be part of. I didn't react, not once. I said thank you, smiled politely, and kept my distance. But every night I wrote it all down. Every fake gesture, every forced conversation, every sugar-coated word dipped in manipulation. My diary became my mirror. It didn't lie to me. One evening, I sat in the hallway pretending to read while Peter and Jessica whispered in the kitchen. They thought I couldn't hear, but I did. "She's softening up," Jessica said. "If she rewrites it, we still get half." Peter replied, "We need to keep it up, just until she talks to the lawyer again." My heart didn't sink. It hardened. They weren't trying to rebuild a connection. They were trying to reclaim what they lost. I wasn't a mother to them anymore. I was a door they needed to keep open just long enough to sneak back through. I saw it in how they watched me when they thought I wasn't looking, in how their affection, always, came with timing, never spontaneity. But they didn't know I had an ally, Ethan. My grandson had grown quiet over the weeks, but not the kind of quiet that comes from ignorance, the kind that comes from observation. He was watching, and I knew it. One afternoon, as he helped me to the garden, he leaned in and said, "Grandma, did something happen?" I didn't answer, just smiled and patted his hand. That night, I heard him outside my door, just standing there, listening, waiting, and part of me hoped he would hear what I had heard, because sometimes it takes the innocence of someone untouched by greed to see the truth clearly. And now I ask you, have you ever smiled back at someone who once ignored your tears just to watch their mask slip? Tell me in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. They had no idea I was capable of keeping records. They assumed, perhaps out of arrogance or sheer neglect, that my silence meant ignorance. But silence is a powerful tool when used wisely. It listens, it observes, and more importantly, it remembers. For months I watched them morph into strangers, selfish, calculating, and blinded by the scent of inheritance. But I was not the helpless old woman they believed I had become. I was a mother, a woman who had once built a home from nothing, a woman who survived the loss of her husband, a woman who raised a child from diapers to adulthood. I knew how to stay quiet, but I also knew how to strike. The day had come, the room was ready, the truth carefully arranged like the final pieces of a puzzle. I called everyone to the living room. Jessica entered first, faking a smile, followed by Peter, who looked mildly annoyed as if I had interrupted something important. Emily sat down, eyes on her phone, barely noticing me. But Ethan walked in slowly, head high, eyes full of quiet concern. He knew, or at least he suspected. And now he was going to hear it all. I stood by the mantel. My diary rested on the coffee table, alongside a small speaker and a stack of printed screenshots. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to reveal. I took a breath and looked at them. Then I pressed play. Jessica's voice filled the room first. Recorded weeks earlier, it played clearly. If she changes that will, we lose everything. A pause. Then Peter's voice. She's too old to notice. Just act sweet. She'll fall for it. The silence that followed in the room was deafening. I watched their expressions flicker. Jessica froze, her smile cracking at the edges. Peter's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. Emily finally looked up from her phone, blinking as if waking from a dream. I opened my diary and began to read. My voice did not waver. Entry from March 3rd. They brought me coffee this morning. Jessica smiled for the first time in months, but last night I heard her say I was just a liability. That if I were gone, things would be simpler. I wonder when my presence became such a burden. Page after page I unfolded the truth. My truth. I showed the printed screenshots, messages between Jessica and Peter, mocking me, planning what they would do once I was no longer around. I showed photos Ethan had helped me take, locked doors, neglected meals, empty pill bottles they forgot to refill. Then I read the line I had written again and again. My inheritance will go to the one who loves me when I appear to have nothing left. The words hung in the air like thunder. Ethan stood, his voice broke. Grandma, I never needed your money, I just needed you, and I was always here, always. He crossed the room and hugged me. Tight, real. He wasn't performing, he wasn't pretending. He was home. Jessica stood, trying to laugh. Mum, this is all a misunderstanding. You're taking things out of context. Those recordings, they don't mean anything. We were just venting. But Peter didn't try to lie. He exploded. You're seriously going to ruin everything over this? Over some feelings written in a book? We took you in. You owe us. I turned to him calmly. No, I owe myself peace. I owe myself dignity. And I owe the truth to those who have never lied to me. The room fractured. The mask had fallen. And they could no longer pretend. And now I ask you, have you ever reached a point where staying silent cost more than speaking up? Share your turning point in the comments. Your truth might be the strength someone else is waiting for. The morning after that night of revelations, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in my hands and a lightness in my soul I hadn't felt in years. The diary, now closed, rested beside me like a shield that had protected me from silence and hypocrisy. My grandson, sitting across from me, still seemed shaken by everything we had heard together. But there was a new kind of strength in his eyes. A maturity that didn't come from age, but from the courage to choose the right side, when everything else screamed otherwise. He didn't see me as a burden. He saw me as his roots, as his origin. And that was more precious than any inheritance. That same week, with the help of the family lawyer, who had once been a friend to my late husband, I went to the notary office. No fuss. No need for more confrontations or justifications. I rewrote my will. And every line, every paragraph was an act of justice. Everything I had built over decades of work, sacrifice, and love would not be handed to those who treated me with neglect, faked affection, and loved only when they thought there was something to gain. It would go to the hands that had reached out to me with kindness when all I had left was silence and pain. Everything went into Ethan's name, every penny, every inch of the house, every memory worth keeping alive. I signed with a steady hand, stronger than I'd felt in months. As I left that office, I took the deepest breath of my life. It felt like I had just released centuries of bitterness. And I decided right then and there that I would no longer live in a place where love was conditional and respect depended on whether I was still useful. With Ethan's help, I found a small cottage on the edge of town, not far from a little park where my husband and I used to go for walks. The house was simple, but after years of being confined behind closed doors and forced smiles, the space felt infinite. Ethan helped me paint the walls. I chose every color, soft pink in the kitchen, calm blue in the bedroom. We planted flowers outside. It wasn't just a new home. It was a declaration of freedom. The first weeks were all about rediscovery. I woke up early, made my own coffee, sat on the porch just to listen to the birds, sounds I hadn't noticed in years. I began writing again, not hidden words in secret pages, but open reflections on gratitude, courage, and the strength you find when everything else is stripped away. Ethan visited every week, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with books, but always with a hug that lasted longer than any conversation. We sat together in the garden we'd created. Each plant had a name, a story. Lilies for forgiveness, sunflowers for hope, lavender for peace finally found. One afternoon, he looked at me and said, "Grandma, I just want you to know, you taught me what real love means." And I didn't need to say a word. I just held his hand. On the last page of my new journal, I wrote a single sentence. They wanted my legacy, but he inherited my soul. And that's what truly matters in the end. Not what we leave behind, but who we choose to trust with our truth. That house where I was once treated like an invisible weight, I never went back. I have no intention to. Some walls hear too much, some doors close too tightly. The past may teach, but it should never be home. Today my freedom smells like wet earth, looks like blooming flowers, and sounds like laughter that doesn't have to pretend. I am no longer someone's burden. I am someone's roots, and wherever there are roots, there is life. Now I ask you, have you ever had to choose between your peace and the presence of people who only tolerated you when they thought they could gain something? Tell your story in the comments. You might be the voice someone else has been waiting for. When I closed the door to my new home for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel lonely. I felt peace. A peace that didn't come from silence alone, but from the presence of respect. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't make me feel invisible. It wrapped around me gently, reminding me that starting over was still possible, even after everything, even after believing for years that it was too late. The time I spent surrounded by cold glances, empty gestures, and hollow words didn't destroy who I was. It only buried it. And it took pain to wake me up, disappointment to push me to a limit I never thought I'd reach. For me to remember I still had a voice, that my story still deserved to be told with dignity, that my heart, even tired, still knew how to recognize real love, the kind that doesn't pretend, doesn't barter, and doesn't appear only when there's something to gain. So, with courage and faith, I turned the page of my life. Today, I no longer worry about being remembered by those who so easily forgot me. I don't wait for calls from those who only cared about my money. I don't seek approval from anyone who saw me as a burden. Now my memory belongs to those who see me as a whole person, with a history, with scars, with a light that still shines. I am not an inheritance. I am presence. And that's what I want to leave behind. Not wealth, but example. The flowers I planted in the garden of my new home are more than decoration. They're symbols. Each one is a reminder that life blooms where truth lives. The white lily I placed at the entrance is called forgiveness. The red rose in the corner stands for strength. And the daisy by the window? That one's hope. Because despite everything I went through, I'm not held together by bitterness. I'm held by faith. Faith that God never forgets His children, that He hears the cries of broken hearts, that even when everyone turns their backs, He remains steady, waiting for the right moment to open the door to our freedom. So many times, pain convinces us we're alone. But the truth is, miracles are being prepared in silence. And when they come, they change everything. The setting, the bonds, the future. That's what happened to me. When I decided to believe in myself again, life responded. When I stopped begging for love from those who didn't know how to give it, true love knocked on my door. And it was my grandson, the boy I once held in my arms who, in the darkest moment of my life, extended his arms to lift me out of the shadows. No, I don't have all the things the world values. I don't live in a mansion. I don't drive a fancy car. I don't have big Sunday family dinners, but I have peace. I have faith. And I have the certainty that I was loved by the one who mattered. And that, my dear, is freedom. That is dignity. That is victory. If you've made it this far, I want to tell you something. It's never too late to stand up. It's never too late to start over. And more than anything, never believe that you only matter when you're useful, strong, or productive. You matter simply because you exist, because your story is worth something, because your soul carries a light no one has the right to dim. Now tell me, have you ever had to walk away from someone who claimed to love you just to find yourself again? Have you ever had to choose between pleasing others and honoring your own peace? Share your story in the comments. It might be exactly what someone else is praying for right now. If this video touched your heart, please like and subscribe to the channel. We're here to tell stories that heal, awaken, and transform. And in the next video, you'll hear the story of a grandmother who secretly recorded her family for 30 days. And what she uncovered will leave you speechless. Until then, take care of those who take care of you. And never, ever settle for less than you deserve.